I want you to picture something ordinary first, because that's how it always starts. Not with a scream. With a driveway. I'd been gone 4 days. A work trip, the kind where you eat bad hotel breakfast and answer emails in a rental car. I remember rolling my suitcase up my own driveway, past my own mailbox, thinking about nothing more dramatic than laundry and grocery shopping. That's the version of me I want you to hold on to for a second, because she didn't exist much longer. I opened my front door and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Bacon. Not mine. I don't cook bacon on a Monday morning. Then I noticed the boxes. 4 of them, cardboard, stacked in the upstairs hallway, and they had my name on them. Not written by me. My clothes folded by someone else's hands, packed like I was the one moving out. And then I saw the door. My bedroom door. The one that had never needed a lock in 2 years because I lived there alone. There was a brand new brass knob on it now, with a keyhole, gleaming like it had been installed that very morning. Which, it turned out, it had. Here's the part one need you to sit with, because it's the whole engine of what happened next. Nobody broke in. Nobody snuck around behind my back. My own parents were sitting at my kitchen table when I walked downstairs, drinking coffee I'd paid for, acting like absolutely nothing in the world had shifted. Taking my bedroom wasn't the whole plan. It was just the opening move. Before that summer ended, my family would look me in the eye and inform me that half of my house, the house with my name alone on the deed, now belonged to them as their personal space. And what I did about it put all 4 of their names on a court docket, in a room where the word family doesn't carry any legal weight at all. If you've ever been the one who gives until it hurts, the responsible one, the one who always pays, the one everyone assumes will fold, stay with me. Because this isn't a story about a house. It's a story about what happens the year you stop paying rent on your own family. Let me back up, because you need to understand what that house actually meant to me before you can understand what it cost me to defend it. It's a 4-bedroom craftsman in a quiet suburb north of Columbus. Porch swing out front, a maple tree that turns the whole street red every October. I bought it 2 years ago at 29. No cosigner. No help. Just me and a decade of saying no to things other people said yes to. I started working co-op semesters at 19, writing code for an insurance company while my roommates were at football games. I saved like it was a religion. Skipped vacations. Drove a car with crank windows well past the point where it was funny. I'm not telling you this to complain. I'm telling you because my family never did that math, and the math matters to everything that comes after. In my family, I've been the fixer since I was a teenager. When my older brother buried himself in credit card debt, I paid it off. When my dad's truck died the same month as the water heater, I covered both and called it a birthday gift so nobody had to say thank you. I minded less than I should have. Being useful felt like being loved, and for a long time I hadn't learned the difference between the two. But the house was different. The house was the one thing on this entire earth that was only mine. My name alone on the deed. My key in the lock. Saturday mornings, coffee on that porch swing, in total silence, and the silence belonged to me too. I got exactly 2 years of that. Here's something that might surprise you. What happened to me isn't rare. Multi-generational households have exploded over the last decade. Adults living with parents or parents moving in with adult kids has gone up 271% since 2011. 1 in 4 adults in this country is currently living some version of my story. So if any of this sounds familiar, you are not the only one. You're part of a very large, very quiet club nobody talks about until the lock shows up on the bedroom door. It started on a Tuesday in February, with a phone call and a voice like warm bread. My mother said, "Honey, we need a little favor." Here was the favor. My parents had sold the house I grew up in. The yard and the stairs had gotten to be too much, and put a deposit on a condo in a 55-plus community. The builder promised an April closing. 6 weeks, give or take. On top of that, my dad had knee surgery scheduled for March, and their rental options with a walker involved were slim. My mom laid it out sweet and simple. Just till the condo's ready, honey. You've got all that room. And look, I'm not a monster. He's my dad. Of course they could come. But I'd watched enough family arrangements curdled to know that temporary is the most dangerous word in the English language. So I did what I do at work when a project has fuzzy edges. I wrote it down. I sent them an email that night, friendly as a greeting card, terms in plain sight. Guest room and hall bath. Utilities split down the middle. And a date, 8 weeks, with a buffer past the builder's promise, and a line saying we'd revisit together if the condo slipped. My mother replied 4 minutes later. No sentence. No signature. Just a single red heart emoji. At the time, I took that as a yes. I know better now. A heart emoji is not a yes. It's a door you left unlocked. And here's the thing I didn't know yet, the thing that would have changed how hard I pushed back if I had. Nearly 1 in 5 families in this exact situation, adult children or relatives moving in temporarily, report that the relative simply never left. Not eventually. Never. That number has almost tripled in the last decade. I wasn't being paranoid when I put a date in that email. I was, statistically, being exactly as careful as I needed to be. I just didn't push hard enough. They moved in 2 days before Dad's surgery, and the first week was honestly fine. I drove him to the hospital, set up the guest room with a shower chair and his pill organizer. This is what family does, and I was glad to do it. The erosion started in week 2. And it started, like it always does, somewhere small enough that saying something out loud would have made me feel ridiculous. I came home from the office one evening in week 2, and my kitchen had been rearranged. Pots where the bowls used to live. My good knives hidden away in a drawer, because apparently that's how a kitchen is supposed to flow. My coffee maker got demoted to the pantry to make room for my mother's 12-cup percolator, the one that gurgles like it's trying to say something. Small things. Grain of sand things. I let them go one by one, because Dad was healing well and April felt close. Then Dad's recliner arrived from storage. A huge brown thing that landed in my living room like a meteor aimed directly at a television that now never turned off. Fox in the morning, westerns all afternoon, volume set somewhere around hurricane. I'd come downstairs at 6 a.m., and the house already smelled like bacon and sounded like a rerun I hadn't agreed to watch. April came. The builder called. The closing slipped to June. Supply issues, they said. Everybody's got supply issues these days. My mother relayed the news with a strange little brightness, patting my arm like I was the one who needed comforting. Looks like you're stuck with us a bit longer, sweetheart. That night I updated the date in my calendar and told myself 8 weeks was always the optimistic number. People do this to themselves constantly. They draw a boundary, then quietly talk themselves out of enforcing it the first time it gets inconvenient. I want to be honest with you, that was my first real mistake. Not the boundary. The talking myself out of it. A week later, I was carrying laundry past the guest room and heard my mother on the phone with my aunt, voice easy and proud. "Oh, we're all settled in," she said. "You should see what we've done with our house." Our house. I stood in that hallway holding a basket of towels, and I let even that go. Almost. In May, I lost my office. It happened politely, the way everything in my family happens, right up until it doesn't. Dad's physical therapist recommended a stationary bike and resistance bands. My mother decided the only possible location for that equipment was my first-floor office, the one room in the house where I could shut a door and actually earn the money that was paying for the entire operation. I told her, plainly, that I work from home 3 days a week. She smiled at me like I'd said something adorable and moved my monitor to the dining room table herself. "You're young, honey. You can work anywhere. Your father needs his equipment on one floor." So for the rest of the spring, I took client calls at the dining table while a western thundered in the next room and the percolator burped like a swamp. I'd mute myself mid-sentence to say, "Mom, I'm presenting," and she'd stage whisper, "Don't mind me," while unloading the dishwasher one clanging pan at a time. I want to be fair here, because fairness matters even when I'm the one who got flattened. Dad did his exercises. He got stronger. By early June, he graduated from the walker and was taking the stairs like a man 10 years younger. Which meant, if anyone had bothered to ask, the actual medical reason for any of this had quietly expired. Nobody asked. This is the part that financial therapists talk about when they study families like mine, and there are a lot of us. A recent study found that over 40% of adults currently rely on the previous generation for some kind of financial support, and the number one predictor of resentment isn't the support itself. It's the absence of an agreed end date. No boundary, no term, no shared understanding of whether something is a gift, a loan, or an emergency bridge. Just an open tab, quietly extending itself one excuse at a time. I had written an end date. I just hadn't yet learned that writing it down and enforcing it are two completely different skills. I circled the end of June on my mental calendar and promised myself a reckoning, a kind one, with pie, but a reckoning nonetheless. Then my phone rang, and the screen said Brett, my brother never calls me. He hadn't called on my birthday in 3 years. Brett only calls when something in his life has broken, and this time, the broken thing turned out to be his entire life. He was 35, 4 years older than me, and until April he'd been a production supervisor at an auto parts plant outside Dayton. The plant cut a third of its staff. Brett was in the third. He'd hidden it from everyone for 2 months, quietly burning through his severance while telling his pregnant wife, Kayla, that things were in motion. Their lease was up in June. Their landlord wanted a renewal signed or the keys back. All of this came out in one long, aggrieved phone call in which my brother never once said the word sorry and never once said the word please. What he said was, "So, we're thinking we'll just set up at your place till the baby comes." Mom already said it makes sense. I looked at the wall for a second. I said I was sorry about the job, that we'd figure something out, and that I needed to think about what was actually possible, because I already had a full house, and a family under my roof was turning out to be a lot more than I'd signed up for. That's not a no. I've replayed it 100 times, and it still wasn't a no. It was a let me think from a woman who'd been trained her entire life never to say the other thing. That Friday, I flew out for a 4-day work trip that had been on my calendar for a quarter. Sunday night, my phone buzzed in the hotel room. A text from my best friend Jess, who lives 3 streets over, asterisk, hey, random question. Did you know there's a U-Haul in your driveway? Asterisk, I stood at that hotel window and did the time zone math, and I understood, with total clarity, that whatever I decided no longer mattered. My mother had already opened my front door for them. I got home Monday night to a house that had been colonized. I came home Monday night to a house that had been colonized. Brett's truck sat in my spot on the driveway. My little treadmill room was packed to the ceiling with their belongings, overflow spilling into half my basement. Kayla hugged me at the door, enormous and sweet-voiced, saying the drive up had been brutal. Brett hugged me too, big and loud, like this was a reunion I'd somehow won. My mother stood behind them, beaming like she'd pulled off a surprise party. Family shows up for family, she said, and squeezed my arm. I want you to know I didn't smile and swallow it. I said, right there in front of everyone, that this wasn't what I'd agreed to, that 6 weeks was the absolute ceiling while they found their own place. Brett waved me off with a laugh. Relax, it's temporary. You sound like a landlord. Everyone chuckled. Even Dad. The conversation moved on to nursery colors like weather that had already passed through. That was the week Brett called a family dinner and stood up at the head of my table, my chair, and delivered what he called the family plan with the bright, rehearsed confidence of a man unveiling a quarterly strategy. Their growing family needed real space, he explained. So they'd keep the master bedroom, obviously, that was already done. My office would become the nursery. Kayla had already picked the paint. They'd take the living room as their evening family zone, and half the garage for his tools and the baby gear. Basically, the upstairs and front half is our personal space, he said, drawing a line through the air over my own dinner table. You've still got your room and the kitchen, since you're the cook around here anyway. He grinned like he'd paid me a compliment. I waited for my parents to laugh, because it was, objectively, hilarious. A man with no job and no lease, standing in a house he didn't own, awarding himself half of it. My mother nodded along. Kayla pulled up a Pinterest board for the nursery, my office, and passed her phone around the table. I said one thing. Brett, this is my house. And my brother looked at me with genuine, unbothered warmth and said the sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. Come on, Myra. It's not stealing if it's family. Nobody flinched. Forks kept moving. Here's what I didn't understand yet, sitting there. Financial therapists who study exactly this dynamic will tell you there's rarely a villain twirling a mustache in these situations. What breaks families isn't cruelty. It's the total absence of a defined line between gift, loan, and entitlement. Without that line, someone always ends up assuming the open tab is permanent. My brother wasn't lying to me at that table. He genuinely believed what he was saying. That's what made it so much harder to fight. The week after that dinner, Brett annexed the garage. I came home to find my mower, my Christmas bins, and my kayak sitting out on the lawn like evicted tenants, replaced by his workbench and 40 boxes of tools. That was the day I called the police non-emergency line, certain that somebody official could explain to my brother whose name was on the deed. A patrol officer came out, polite, about my age, hands tucked in his vest, and he listened to everyone. Then he took me aside on my own porch and gave it to me straight. My parents and my brother had been living there for months. They got mail there. That made them residents of the home regardless of whose name was on the paperwork. If I changed the locks or put their things on the curb myself, I'd be the one breaking the law. Ohio calls that an illegal lockout, and residents can actually sue the homeowner over it. The way this works, he said, almost apologetic, is you'd have to evict them formally. Like any landlord. Evict. The word dropped into my quiet street like a stone through a window. I laughed one short, unfunny laugh and asked if he was serious. Evict my own parents. He shrugged in a way that told me he'd seen this exact movie before, in nicer driveways than mine. Civil matter, ma'am. I'm sorry. Here's the part that surprised me most once I actually researched it. There is no shortcut anywhere in the country for this. Every state treats a family member who's lived in your home with your permission as what the law calls a tenant at will. Full notice periods required, full court process, regardless of blood relation and regardless of whether a single dollar of rent was ever paid. The law protecting my house was the exact same law protecting the people taking it from me. The next morning, before work, I did something small that turned out to be the hinge of my entire year. I opened a note on my phone and started writing down dates. What was proposed? What was said? Quietly, a habit was born. And then I opened my mailbox and found the thing that changed the temperature of everything. My mailbox was full of other people's lives. Brett's name. Kayla's name. A car insurance renewal. A credit union statement. Prenatal clinic appointment reminders. And on top, the one that stopped my breath in my throat, an official confirmation that mail forwarding for Brett and Kayla had been activated to my address. I read the effective date twice because I didn't believe it the first time. The forwarding had been set up in the last week of May. They didn't move into my house until June. My brother had rerouted his entire paper life to my address before his boxes ever crossed my doorstep, before I'd even given him an answer. I set the stack on the counter in front of him and asked, quietly, what the date meant. My brother, over the sink, in the exact tone you'd use to explain parking rules, said, "It means I know my rights, little sister. Look it up. Residency. You can't just throw family out." He tapped the counter twice with 2 fingers and walked back to his game. No fog. No drift. No accidental slide into dependency. He had researched occupancy law before he ever loaded the U-Haul. This wasn't a family falling on hard times. It was a plan, and I was the last one told about it. That night, I took a red folder from my office supplies, one of the last things in that room that was still mine, and I filled it. The deed with my name alone on it. Closing documents. 2 years of mortgage statements, every one paid from my checking account. The February email with the 8-week terms. The heart emoji, screenshotted with its date. Utility bills, before and after. Photographs of the new brass lock, the boxes with my name on them, my kayak on the lawn. Then I did the part one still think about. I didn't leave that folder in the house. There was no drawer, no closet, no room left in my own home that I trusted to stay mine. I walked out to my car in my work clothes, opened the trunk, and laid the folder flat under the cargo mat. My documents were safer in a parking lot than they were in my house. On my lunch break, I made 2 calls. One to Jess. One to a landlord-tenant law office downtown. I want to tell you about the 2 moments I nearly gave everything back, because leaving them out would make me a liar, and this isn't a story about a woman who never wavered. It's a story about a woman who wavered twice and kept going anyway. The first one happened about 10 days after I'd served the notices. I'll get to that part in a minute. It was 2 in the morning, and I came down for water and saw light under the garage door. Brett's half, as he called it. I found him sitting on a paint bucket in the middle of his workbench kingdom, not on his phone, not drinking, just turning something over in his hands. It was his old badge from the plant, laminated, a terrible photo, the one he used to flash around at Christmas like a sheriff's star, back when he was the only Thornton kid with a title. He didn't hear me at first. And for a second, I saw my brother the way he must see himself at 2 in the morning, 60-something job applications deep, wife due in a few months, sleeping in a bedroom his little sister paid for. When he noticed me, he didn't put the badge away. He just said to the floor, 15 years I gave that place. I ran a whole shift. Guys twice my age called me boss. And then, quieter, the truest thing my brother said to me all summer, you weren't even trying to beat me, Myra. That's the part one can't live with. You weren't even trying. Standing in that doorway in my bathrobe, I felt the ground actually tilt. I thought about tearing up every notice I'd prepared. About how easy it would be to go back to being the fixer loved, useful, and slowly erased. Pity is quicksand, and I was in it to my knees. Then morning came, and Brett walked past me at the coffee maker, tapped the top of my head like you'd tap a kid's, and said, "Sleep okay in your little room?" The window closed. The second near surrender was worse, because it wasn't manipulation, it was real. The second week of August, my father had chest pains at dinner. Gray face, hand on his sternum, fork down. We called 911, and I followed the ambulance with my mother rigid in the passenger seat. For 90 minutes in that waiting room, I wasn't anybody's plaintiff. I was just a daughter making bargains with God. It turned out to be angina, serious, but stable. New medication, a cardiology follow-up, no procedure needed. My mother turned from the triage desk with her eyes gone flat as Nicholson said, "I hope it was worth it. The stress of what you're doing, this is what it does. You're doing this to him." For about a minute, standing under those fluorescent lights, she had me completely. Then something happened that I couldn't have scripted. My parents' old next-door neighbor was in the same waiting room with his grandson's broken wrist. He hugged my mother, all warmth, and said, "Carol, congratulations on the condo. By the way, saw the crew finishing your unit back in early July. You all settled in yet?" Early July, I watched my mother's face do something I had never once seen it do. She glanced at me, fast, before she answered him. And that glance told me everything I needed to know. The condo hadn't slipped. It had been sitting finished for over a month. They could have closed and packed and left before I ever printed a single notice. They'd let the delay story stand because my mother wanted the whole family under one roof when her grandson arrived. They'd chosen. Long before they ever asked me to. Let me back up to how the notices actually started, because that hospital scene only makes sense once you know what I'd already set in motion. On the advice of the lawyer I'd hired, a landlord-tenant attorney downtown with gray-streaked hair and a handshake like a stapler, I served all 4 of them written 30-day notices, terminating their permission to live in my house. I decided they wouldn't hear it from a mail carrier. They'd hear it from me, at the table where they'd knotted away my bedroom in the first place. I set an envelope in front of each of them and said the only sentence I'd rehearsed, "I love you, and in 30 days, this stops being your address." My mother read 2 lines, understood, and came up out of her chair with a sound I'd never heard from her, half sob, half fury, saying I was doing this to my own mother, that the family was cursed the day I bought this house. My brother didn't even finish reading his. He held my eyes, smiled, and tore the notice in half like a losing ticket. My father read every word of his, front and back, slowly, then folded it into quarters and tucked it into a shirt pocket and quietly started clearing the dishes. The 30 days ran out. Nobody packed a single box. That Saturday, my brother threw a barbecue in my backyard, a dozen of his buddies around my patio table, burgers on my grill, country music off a speaker. He caught my eye through the kitchen window and raised his soda can an inch a little toast. Your move, little sister. He'd made his read of me, and to be fair, it was based on 31 years of good data. Asterisk Myra folds. Myra pays. Myra will not follow through on anything that makes mom cry. Asterisk what followed was 3 waves of pressure, back to back, and together they nearly worked. Wave 1. My family threw Kayla's baby shower in my own living room, streamers on my mantle, a diaper cake on my coffee table, planned by my mother, hosted in rooms I was actively trying to get back, and nobody told me because, as she explained while refilling the punch, we didn't think you'd want to be involved. I ate a piece of the cake standing in my own kitchen like a caterer. Wave 2. A delegation arrived 2 days later, an uncle and my mother's pastor, for what they called a healing conversation, which turned out to be a proposal. Drop the case. Brett and Kayla stay 1 more year, rent-free, in writing this time, and the family moves forward in grace. Wave 3 was Kayla herself, in the hallway that night, hands on her belly, voice trembling. You'd really put a newborn on the street? That one landed. I'll be honest with you. That night I sat on the edge of a bed that wasn't even mine anymore, thumb over my lawyer's number, 1 tap away from folding. I called my best friend instead. She listened, and then she asked the only question that actually mattered. Walk me through the deal, Myra. What do you get? I started to answer. And then I stopped, because I realized I didn't have one. The hearing was Tuesday. On Monday night, my mother knocked on my door. She knocked, which should have told me something right there. Nobody in that house had knocked on a door in months. She sat on the edge of the small bed where I'd been sleeping since July, smoothed the quilt she'd made me in college, and for the first time all summer, spoke to me in her real voice. The one from before. The one that used to read to me at night. Drop it, honey. Call the lawyer tomorrow morning. Drop it, and everything goes back to normal. We'll forget this whole thing ever happened. You're my daughter. I don't want to lose you over a house. I have to be honest with you about the price of things because normal was not a small offer. Normal meant Sunday dinners and my mother's voice filling the kitchen. Normal meant being in the room in a few months when my nephew took his first breath instead of hearing about it secondhand. Normal was the thing I had been paying for, installment by installment, since I was 19 years old. And my mother was offering it to me one last time, at the usual price. Everything I had. That's the choice nobody warns you about in stories like this. It isn't good versus evil. It's the family you wish you had versus the person you've actually become. You only get to keep one. I took her hand and said it as gently as the truth allowed. Mom, normal was me paying for a seat at a table you all owned. I'm done renting. I'd rather be your daughter than your tenant, but I won't be your bank. She pulled her hand back. The real voice disappeared, and the other one came back in its place. Then you'll sit in that courtroom alone, she said from the doorway. She was almost right. My mother didn't come to the courthouse. My brother did, and he brought a speech. If you've never sat in an eviction courtroom, put away your TV drama expectations. It's a plain room, wooden benches, a ceiling fan that ticks. 30 strangers holding paperwork, and a magistrate moving through cases like a checkout line. When our case was called, we took our 2 tables. My lawyer and me on one side, red folder open. Brett on the other, in the good blazer my mother had bought him. Kayla beside him, dressed like a character witness. The magistrate had asked these same 4 questions 10,000 times, and she asked them again in the same flat, patient voice. Whose name is on the deed? Mine alone. Certified copy handed up. Is there a lease? No. Has any rent ever been paid? Any amount, ever? Not $1. My brother agreed to this proudly, because in his mind, paying rent would have been the insult. Were the notices properly served? 30-day and 3-day, certified mail receipts, a witness affidavit, photographs. Then Brett stood up and gave his speech. I'll grant him this, he'd practiced. He talked about family meaning something. About verbal promises. About the wall in my office he'd primed for the nursery, and a sister with 2 incomes worth of luck who owed her family more than a locked door. The magistrate listened with her chin on her hand, and when he finished, she asked him 4 small questions of her own. Do you have that promise in writing? No, is your name on the deed or the mortgage? No, have you paid toward the property in any form? No, do you contest that you received proper notice? No. For no's, each one quieter than the last, and it was over. Ohio law wants real estate promises on paper, the magistrate said, not remembered fondly. Judgment for the plaintiff. Move out ordered within 10 days. 90 seconds of questions. That's what my brother's 50% came down to. In the hallway afterward, Brett called me a traitor to my family, loud enough that a bailiff drifted over. I let him run out of air, and then I gave him back his own words, at kitchen table volume. You keep saying it's not stealing if it's family. The judge just gave it a different name. And then, because 15 years of ledgers were finally closing, you taught me family keeps score, Brett. I'm just the first one who wrote it down. The law gave them 10 days. My parents used to. They closed on their condo that same week, the one that had been sitting finished since July, a fact nobody mentioned and everybody already knew. When the last box was loaded, my mother stood on my porch, looked past me at the house like it was a person who'd disappointed her, and said, I hope this house keeps you warm, Myra. No hug. Down the steps, into the truck. That one still aches, and I've decided it's allowed to. My father stayed behind a minute. He took his old toolbox out to my back gate, the one that had screeched since March, the one he'd promised to fix once he could walk again, and oiled the hinges until it swung silent. Then he set his house key on the counter, next to an envelope with $400 in worn 20s. For the utilities, he said. Some of it. And then he told me, in the longest speech I ever heard from him, that he'd watched this exact thing happen to his own sister decades earlier, and had promised himself he'd never sit that quiet again. Turns out quiet is a thing you inherit, kiddo, he said. I'm sorry. My brother used every hour of his 10 days telling the family group chat I'd never go through with it. On day 10, a deputy posted the notice on my door. A crew came to carry out what he'd refused to move himself. The baby's things staged and wrapped first. Nothing left on a curb, whatever the group chat says to this day. Kayla's father showed up in his pickup, quiet and embarrassed, and loaded his pregnant daughter's life into the truck bed without a word, except one thing I heard through the window. Son, nobody took a thing from you. Get in the truck. They pulled out at 4 in the afternoon. That night, for the first time in 7 months, I heard my own refrigerator hum. People pay therapists good money for less than that sound. My nephew was born healthy that fall. I mailed a gift with no lawyers attached, just a note that said the door wasn't locked. No reply came, and I've let that be his answer for now. 2 weeks before Christmas, my parents knocked on my door, actually knocked. My father fixed a sticking window. My mother set the table without rearranging a single cabinet, which from her is basically a treaty. At 7, they put their coats on, because dinner had a start time and an end time now, like any civilized arrangement. At the door, my mother looked around the hallway and said quietly, "It's a good house, Myra." From her, that was the whole apology I was ever going to get. "I know, Mom," I said. And I locked the door behind them, and the lock was just a lock. Here's what this entire, terrible, necessary year taught me. A family that only loves you when you're paying isn't loving you. It's billing you. And if you're one of the roughly 1 in 4 adults living some version of my story right now, the 8-week favor with no real end date, that you can work anywhere, that it's not stealing if it's family, take this as your sign. Put it in writing today. Not because you don't trust them. Because the people who actually love you will never once be offended that you asked.